Hi viewers, this is VASISTA Gayatri Academy. I am Dr. Venugopal. In this video, our discussion is about rule of law. Before discussing the rule of law, the concept of rule of law, let me cast a few sentences about Themis, the goddess of law and justice. Why she holds a balance in one hand and a sword in another hand, and for being blindfolded. The connotation I would like to tell you before jumping into that concept of rule of law. See, the balance means the law and justice will be well balanced. There should not be any imbalance. And it will be sensed by the very sensibility of the hand. Equity and justice, everything will be fairness, everything will be well balanced. And if at all anybody interferes and disturbs it, anybody's involvement causes a lot of havoc there, without any mercy, the sword in the next hand, will be chopped off the head of the person who has involved in it, whether he belongs to high cadre, king, ordinary man, official, government official, or even a servant are not seeing, because being blindfolded, no person of seeing. So impartiality, it represents impartiality. So that is the meaning of Themis, the goddess of law and justice. So impartiality, law and justice, and equity and fairness will be well balanced, and there will not be any bias, to put it in a nutshell. And now, when we come to this rule of law, it is applicable to the government in particular, because there is a separation of powers. Government will be divided into three organs: legislature, executive, judiciary. The power of the legislature is making laws, whereas the executive will be implementing the laws made by the legislature, and the judiciary's duty power is interpreting the law, whether the law made by the legislature is correct or not, law and justice are well balanced or not, and these principles of law and justice are in accordance with the constitution or against the constitution of India. So these are the separation of powers, distribution of powers, we can say. And now when we come to the government, government itself means it will be vested with power, and that power is susceptible to some corruption or some misuse. There is every opportunity for the government to misuse it. What kind of misuse we shall see now? Particularly when the government has the majority, suppose the ruling party has the majority, automatically it will have the majority full power, also high power, and that absolute power will corrupt absolutely. There is a dictum: absolute power corrupts absolutely. That means absolute power sometimes gives the way for injustice or some ill practice or something untoward, something inauspicious, we can say. So the power of the government is the point here, and the rule of law is relevant to the power that is to be exercised by the government. And the rule of law has different principles, so many principles. Let's first have an idea about what does the rule of law implies, and what are the principles that are implied in the rule of law, before discussing the clear perspective of Edward Cook's and A.V. Dais's dimension of the rule of law. Let me have a clear-cut idea about, let's have a clear-cut idea about this rule of law, the principles that are implied here. The first principle is the supremacy of law. That means law is supreme. Nobody is above law. Everybody must be treated equally well. Whether he is a king, emperor, or an ordinary man, law is equal before all. Nobody should be above law. There is a supremacy of law, and everybody must follow, obey the law of the land. The next thing is the concept of law implies rule of law will have the very particular connotations of equity, fairness, and due. What is equity? Equity is that all should be treated alike. There should not be any discrimination. Fairness, and in that treatment, fairness must be there. And due, we have to give everybody his due, his right, liberty, equality, or his livelihood, whatever that a citizen is to be given, he should be given. That is called, we have to give every man his due. So it will become implied in the concept of law and justice. And there should be a restriction on the power of the government. Government has been, no doubt it will be misusing the power whenever the occasion demands, and there should be restriction on the power, on the excessive power of the government. If the government uses any excessive power, there should be restriction. That rule of law will have the restriction on this excessive power of the government. And another one is doctrine of judicial precedent. What is doctrine judicial precedent? The verdict given by the apex court, high court, or supreme court. For example, the adultery law recently in 2000, with the advent of Abraham Shani's case in 2017, the Supreme Court went to the extent of declaring that Section 497 of IPC is not a crime. Adultery is not a crime. So nobody should be punished, nobody should be imprisoned. It is only, suppose adultery happens, it is only a source of divorce. One can take divorce, that's all. So it has undergone a thorough change with the verdict delivered by the Supreme Court of India. So that is to be followed, that is to be respected, and that must be a legitimate law. We must treat it as a legitimate law. This is what the rule of law says. And common law methodology. Another principle of the rule of law is common law methodology. Common law means the law. Actually speaking, law generates from the common sense. All laws are not relevant to each and every case, all cases in the world. Sometimes the cases will be beyond law, because the cases will differ from one another. The present laws may be applicable or sometimes may not be applicable, and then the law will emerge as and when the occasion demands, the situation demands there. From the common sense we have to create the law, and that is the reason why American Chief Justice Wendell Holmes says that law is not predetermined. As and when the occasion demands, sometimes depending upon the peculiarity of the case, speciality of the case, the law will emerge on the spot, he says. So there is common law methodology. So rule of law will not be blind. Sometimes that common law methodology is to be applied. And the next principle in the rule of law is legislature should be prospective and not retrospective. Prospective means, suppose a legislation has been enacted, one act has been enacted. That should be implemented from today onwards, or from tomorrow, or the date fixed by the legislature. Not from 2017 or 18 or 19 like that. Suppose the government has taken the decision, they have enacted the law that act that the pension, the retirement age is extended to 62. That will be implemented from the date of enactment of law, or the date fixed by that in the future, prospective, not with effect from last year or with effect from last month. That is retrospective. So not retrospective but prospective. So legislature should be prospective and not retrospective. If at all it is retrospective, there must be some vested interests on the part of the government or on the part of the officials or so. The next point in the rule of law is independent judiciary. There should not be any external forces or interference of either legislature or the executive in the decisions or verdicts or in the affairs of the judiciary. It should be purely independent. So, rule of law insists on the independent judiciary, and the next one is accountability of the executive, the government officials, the government body, government organizations must be accountable. They are responsible for any mistakes, any lapses, because the government officials are sometime or the other, the government officials, the government organizations or departments will commit some mistake, some injustice, or they may take some arbitrary action, especially in the case of government employees. If they take any arbitrary action or action of injustice against the government employees, it must be checked. So the rule of law will be a great check on it, and they must be taken to task, and they will be punished also. That is accountability. Accountability implies in answerability. They must be answerable, and at the same time they must be punishable also. Punishable means the persons, the employees or employers or the officials or the departments which are responsible for the lapses in the government, the serious lapses or arbitrary actions taken by them. So this is a very important point because it is a very frequent common phenomenon. And the next one is moral basis is an underlying point in the rule of law, because all laws will not aim at the moral values. Rule is rule, law is law. Law is somewhat separated from, according to all legal thinkers, law has been separated from morals. Some people only suggested that both must be correlated. So there is a law moral dichotomy, but moral is not moral is inseparable from the law. So moral values and ethical values must be recognized as and when the occasion demands. So the rule of law will be insisting on this principle, because the thinkers will say that law should not be followed in letter, but all laws must be followed in spirit. When we follow any law in spirit, definitely ethical values and moral values will also be considered. At least due weightage will be given. So that consideration must be there. It is an underlying point in the rule of law. And last but not the least is 10th one is ignorance of law is not excused. That is a maxim. That means I don't know about this law, I don't know the rules and regulations and all that. Because of that, I have committed this mistake and all. If you say like that, it is not accepted. Every citizen is expected to know something about law, at least the fundamental rules and the human fundamental rights and human rights, the basic rights, the basic human rights enshrined in the human rights, also enshrined in the constitutional law. They are expected to know something about these rules, these laws, and these rights, which are most essential to the human being. And then only they can insist on justice. The people can insist on justice, and the people's interference in the administration of justice is made possible. This is what the rule of law insists on. And what Edward Coke says about the rule of law, how that idea has been evolved and developed by A.V. Dicey. We shall discuss that in the next part of the topic. Thank you very much for listening to me.